The Morning Majority on 630.
WMAL.
It's 8:07 on WMAL, and we have Tucker Carlson. Tucker, I promised the audience that you had solved the debt problem over an early morning run and breakfast. Is that true?
Of course it's true, MKH. You kidding?
Good.
I'm sitting here reading Politico and learning that the reason the deal hasn't been reached is because of the fanatical hard right of
Yes.
the Republican Party.
Yeah, and if you ask Sheila Jackson-Lee, it's also because they're racist and radical.
Yeah, Politico hasn't written that piece yet, but I'm sure they will. Yeah, it's because, the president wants a deal. He's a responsible steward of America's economy, and he wants to reach accommodation, but these fanatics, these Jim Jones acolytes, these nutcases probably armed on the Republican side are preventing Jesus from bringing world peace. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I, for one, am frightened of them.
So
no, I can't even. It's sorry, I don't mean to rant on the radio, but it is unbelievable to me that narrative.
I read that same piece last night. And I said, all right, so people who really think that we have a debt problem and we can't continue to do this are now radicals and hardliners instead of being just fiscally responsible.
Yeah,
and
hard right.
Yeah, hard right. All right, but let's call them hard right just for the sake of argument. The hard right doesn't seem to want to give in. You've got McConnell and Boehner that seem at least open to making a deal, and then the president who's out there saying, well, this sounds good, this sounds good, this sounds good, this sounds good. He's willing to make a deal as well. So how does it play out, Tucker?
Well, it's all in the details. I mean, everyone would like to make a deal. I do think the Republicans are genuinely afraid of busting the debt ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no question they don't want to be blamed for default. I don't think they want default as an academic matter. But and I think the president would like to reach accommodation as well. But he's under enormous pressure from Democrats not to in any way reduce the generous entitlement benefits that got us here in the first place. I mean, the reason we have this massive deficit and the debt that results is because we're paying way more in entitlement benefits than we can afford. I mean, it's kind of that simple. And the Democrats can't move on that. Republicans are adamantly opposed to raising taxes in any way, and your average Republican member of Congress realizes, his base won't put up with that. They don't want that. So there's an ideological gap, a sincere one, between the parties. That's the problem.
All right, but
it's really that simple.
Does the Republican Party have a messaging problem? And by that I mean that seems they have so many deals. They have too many deals. I mean, you've got Boehner with the grand bargain. You've got Cantor with a cut for cut. You've got Coburn coming out with his own plan today. You got the House Republicans, those hardliners who want the cap cut and balance. And and then there's people who just say, "Hey, give me a constitutional amendment on a balanced budget, and I'll deal with it." I mean, they have so many choices out there. It's like a Chinese menu, and you just got to pick one.
Yeah, I'll take number 57. I mean, the problem is that the Republican Party, which historically has been pretty disciplined, a pretty hierarchical party, top-down, tight message, it has completely collapsed. I mean, nobody acknowledges. It's like the medieval period when you had two popes. I mean, it's not clear who's in charge. There is a speaker, but there is also, a number two standing right behind him who has an enormous amount of authority, Eric Cantor. And then there are the grassroots, the Tea Party. And so nobody speaks for the entire Republican coalition right now, and that's the problem.
So, Tucker, in a situation like right now, if there's going to be a deal, obviously there's going to have to be some level of compromise somewhere. That doesn't seem to be the case. Both sides are sort of entrenched in their positions, which says to me that what's going on right now is less about a deal and more about one side trying to gain political advantage over the other. I mean, it really comes down to whether or not they may lose a big vote, they may have a big problem, but they may gain an issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Look, the Democrats have already said, point blank, and been quoted saying so, that if they give in any way on entitlements, there goes their big campaign issue. I mean, Barack Obama is going to run for re-election, not on his own record, of course. That would be a little bit difficult at this point. But he's going to run on the idea that if you vote Republican, they're going to make your grandmother eat dog food because they're going to cut Medicare.
But as long as that's the case, Tucker, can we then safely assume that there is not going to be a deal?
Well, there will be because the federal government's about to default on its debt, and the only thing keeping the economy, or at least the federal element of the economy, afloat is foreign investment, and that will dry up.
Well, I believe that that in cases like this, that Congress will not act; it will react, and it probably won't get around to reacting until actually we do reach that point of default.
Well, and we're about to have our debt downgraded, by the way, which is there's a massive cost associated with that, and I think, I mean, Moody's, the rating agencies have basically said this level of debt is unsustainable. Unless you reduce it, we're going to downgrade. We're going to raise the level of risk we assign to your debt, and that's a massive problem. I mean that costs money, just period.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have to deal with this. I mean, reality, math will intrude at some point pretty soon.
Well, Tucker, the good news is that while Barack Obama has not been writing any entitlement cuts down on a sheet of paper or any plan whatsoever, he has been meeting in the Blue Room in the White House with 16 bundlers who raised $3.95 million for him. This is a great story by Neil Monroe at the Daily Caller.
Wait, but I thought that all of Obama's donors were giving $8 each.
They are. Yes.
Yeah. No, it turns out the majority of the money, like the majority of the money the federal government takes in, by the way, in taxes, comes from rich people.
Yep.
That's no surprise at all. Anybody who believed that this was coming from, the rank and file didn't know how fundraising worked. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's, as the economy tanks, as more people are, out of work every quarter, the president has done one thing well, and that's raise a ton of money. And the Republicans, it should be said, have done a spectacularly poor job raising money.
Right, and the White House's argument on this is that the Blue Room is part of the residence, so it's okay for him to do a fundraising meeting there. Do you think he'll see any pushback on that?
Well, he's still using a publicly paid for office to raise money. Look, I mean, I'm not a campaign finance lawyer, but I know sleaze when I see it, and that's what this is.
Finally, I wanted to give you the opportunity, Tucker, to weigh in on the observation of one Sheila Jackson Lee late last week, who has gone on record as saying that she's very troubled, and people who she associates with in her community are very troubled because they don't feel like this is a debate over a very difficult financial issue, that this is about racism.
Well, I tend to kind of agree with that. I mean, Obama's mother was white, and so were his grandparents, and he went to a majority-white school his entire life. I think people who don't like Obama are anti-white. I mean, I don't think there's any question about it.
All right.
So did you, I'm sure you watched the U.S. women's soccer game yesterday because the whole country was just riveted by the game.
No, I didn't. I don't watch soccer on principle, though I do vividly remember Brandi Chastain whipping her shirt off, and for that reason I support it.
All right. Well, we get into this one. Actually, the problem with this one was their shirts actually, they weren't tucked in, so they ended at the waistline. So you saw a lot of belly button yesterday. So you missed.
Really?
Yeah.
Now you're making me regret being on airplanes yesterday.
All right. So
you can find highlights, I'm sure.
You can check it. It only comes around every 4 years, so I'm sure you'll be watching.
Right to YouTube. Thank you.
All right. See you, Tucker.
Thanks.